And I talked about it in my book, The Presidential Principles. I wrote that book about my experiences with presidents and the impact that they had on me, and how you can use those same principles to have an impact as a leader. But one of those principles is to own the accountability and share the responsibility. And what do I mean by that? It's a turn of phrase, which is, it's kind of like a quarterback. It's like a great quarterback. Like when the quarterback wins a Super Bowl, everybody wants to say the quarterback won the game for us. But the best know that they wouldn't have been able to win the game without the other 10 people around them. So they share the responsibility of the success. But if the quarterback loses a Super Bowl, they own the accountability for the loss. That is my fault that we didn't get it done. And the same in the concept of being a president, that if you have a team around you and they steer you in the wrong direction or give you bad advice and something gets massively screwed up, do not throw them under the bus and say, well, they gave me bad advice, or they're just a bad person, or I shouldn't have hired that dummy in the first place. It's my fault that this went wrong, and I'm going to be the one to fix it. I'm going to be the one that makes it right because it falls under my leadership. And so that's a principle that I think the greatest leaders have, is that they own it when it goes wrong. And when it goes well, they give everybody the credit and give everybody some opportunity to say that they were responsible for making the success happen.
This is the Business of Advice podcast, where we help good advisors become great business owners. Hey, I am excited to welcome Anton Gunn to the Business of Advice podcast today. A very close mutual friend of ours, Rory Vaden, has been telling us we've got to connect forever, and so excited to have him on. Give you a little background. Anton is the former senior advisor to President Barack Obama and the world's leading authority on socially conscious leadership. He has a master's degree in social work from the University of South Carolina, where he played football for the Gamecocks. We have some mutual South Carolina friends, too. We were talking about our friend Frank Martin, who was there for quite a while. He was a resident fellow at Harvard and later became the first African-American in history elected to the South Carolina legislature from his district. Today, he works as a C-level executive for an academic health system, but he has spent his entire life helping people build diverse, high-performing teams and a world-class leadership culture. We're going to talk a lot about that today. Anton, welcome to the Business of Advice podcast.
Thank you, Cody. I'm so happy to be with you, excited about it. Any friend of Rory's is a friend of mine.
Yeah, mutually. He's shared so much about you and keeps telling us we got to connect. So I'm glad we made it happen. Well, let's start here. A little back. You were born. I gave a lot of your background, but I'd love for you to just share your journey. Born in Virginia, played football at South Carolina, then entered, a very uncontroversial career field, politics. So I just love to have people share a little bit of their journey, how they've got to where they are, maybe even where your interest in politics came from.
Yeah. So great question. A great place to start. So I'm going to have to start in Virginia and share a little bit about my family, because I think that kind of lays the foundation for you to understand how I enter to the world and how I enter leadership and everything else. Number one, I'm a fourth generation military brat. 4 generations of men in my family all served in the military. My great grandfather, both world wars, grandfather, World War II. My dad and all of his brothers served in the military. My dad was a 22-year Navy vet. Retired as a chief petty officer, was on like 9 different ships, a couple different carriers. And of course, chief petty officers are earned leadership positions. They're not, you can come in as an officer because you went to college. You literally had to earn your way up the ranks. And my dad did that. And my brother also served in the United States Navy. And so we get a chance to talk about him. I'm definitely want to share that story. So on my father's side of the family, it's all public service. They put on a uniform to serve our nation. And so service is a core value to me. My mom was a teacher, an educator. So she spent her life helping to grow and develop other people's children. So she served as well. So you outside of those 2 parents, you got nurses and social workers all in my family. No entrepreneurs, no business owners, none of those things, just people who serve. And so that is the cornerstone of how I come in. Well, going off to college to play football at the University of South Carolina, I came to college expecting the same type of service environment that I grew up in. That's what was my expectations. And that's what I was sold on my recruiting visit. But a long story short, I didn't get any of that and ended up in one of the most hostile and toxic cultures for me personally, that really beat me down emotionally and made me feel like I was less than and not valued enough, and that I wasn't worthy even of having a scholarship of being in college playing football, and just really stole the game away from me. And it was an academic advisor who said to me something off the field as I was walking to class one day. He says, Anton, you're much more than a football player. And it was the first time in about 4 years that anybody said anything that actually inspired or motivated me. And what David Coryell was telling me was that he felt like I could be much more as a leader off the field. And I later began to pursue that path. So I'll close it with this, is that after football, I struggled to find a job. I mean, I interviewed 40 times for different organizations and businesses, and nobody would give me the time of day. They would say, Anton, you look good, you sound good, but you don't have any work experience, because playing college football, you couldn't really have a job. You couldn't really do internships during those days. And so I had nothing on my resume that would make anybody want to hire me other than a few leadership experiences of being in my fraternity and being the president, and then the founder of a student athlete based advocacy organization. And so when I couldn't find a job, I used to cry myself to sleep at night, wondering, what's wrong with me? Everybody's telling me that I got potential, but it's not manifesting. And through a fraternity brother, I got a job at a nonprofit that changed my life. And it was a nonprofit organization that did advocacy work on behalf of people who didn't have health insurance coverage, who were, uninsured. Some of them were entrepreneurs, but most of them were low income people who couldn't afford to buy coverage. And I grew up in a household where I always had health insurance coverage. I was in the military, bro.
Yep.
I mean, we never missed an appointment. I got dental cleanings every 6 months. I got great teeth because of it. We always got prescription drugs, and my mom paid no money to have her 4 kids. But in this circumstance, I learned that in America, depending on your income, depending on where you live, depending on language you speak, your race, ethnicity, all these different dimensions, you might have health insurance coverage and be able to go to the doctor, or you might not. And I thought that was wrong. I thought it was unfair and unjust. And I spent the next 25 years of my life trying to make the system better. And that's what led me into politics.
A couple things. A great story, and I know we're going to talk about a lot of the leadership lessons that you learned along the way there. A couple, and maybe I'll set this up for you. We're recording this a few weeks after our big kickoff event, and we always tie it into a charity, and we raised a little over $1 million for Folds of Honor, which actually gives scholarships to military members who have been either hurt or killed in service. So yes. I know that's a big part of your background, and your brother kind of paid the ultimate sacrifice. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little and just what you learned from that.
Yeah, I do. So I thank you for raising that. And first of all, thank you for your commitment of raising those resources for people in the military. I mean, like, I will tell you that I love the military, support the military, because it's been a big part of my life. But I will say, more than anything else, raising that money is what we all should be doing for those who make the ultimate sacrifice and who give their lives. And literally, my brother gave his life. And the shortest version is, we were all raised by my parents to do something more than the military. Like, literally, my dad said, Anton, go to college and play football because you have that ability. He told my brothers to do what they want to do, that you don't have to choose the military path. My dad was forced into the military by my grandfather because my dad was a screw up. I mean, my dad was a massive screw up, and he wanted the military to straighten him out. And he says, I raised you all better. You got options, take your options. Well, my brother Sharon decided that the best path was for him to start a career in law enforcement was to serve 4 years in the United States Navy, like my dad did. And he joined the Navy in January 2000. February, he left for basic training. He finished basic training in April or May. He went to A school and learned his job, which was a quartermaster and a signalman, which is he's on the bridge to raise the flags on the ship and, communications, onboard communications. And his ship deployed to the Middle East, and while they were going through the port of Aden, they pulled in on October 12, 2000, and two Al-Qaeda suicide bombers lined a small skiff boat with 1,000 pounds of C4 explosive, pulled up alongside the Cole, the USS Cole, and detonated themselves, blowing a 40 by 40 foot hole in the side of the ship. And it killed 17 sailors and injured 39. And my brother was one of the 17 killed aboard the USS Cole. And I've had a lot of dark days in my life. Mm-hmm. I've had a lot of adversity in my life, but there was nothing more devastating than that moment of losing my brother on the Cole, because in my family, 3 generations of men went off and served our country in war, but they all came home. But during peacetime, I mean, there was nothing bad about the year 2000. Like, I mean, we had survived Y2K in 99. And so 2000 was a new millennium. It was a great year. I mean, the only thing bad about 2000 was that, you know, Puff Daddy came out with the worst album of all time. But outside of that, it was a great year. And in October, for my brother to die at the hands of Al-Qaeda, and most Americans had no idea who Al-Qaeda was in 2000. We didn't. We knew about who they were after September of 2001, but in 2000, we didn't have any clue. And so it rocked me and rocked my family, and it made me want to give up on everything that I was doing, everything that I thought was good in the world, and just go home and hold on to my 2 other brothers and hug my mom and dad, because if you don't have family, you don't have anything. And there was a lot of political stuff behind what happened on the Cole that I never really get to share, but the Cole didn't have to be in the port on that day. And those suicide bombers should have never even gotten close to the ship.
Yeah.
But as leaders, we all have blind spots. And the president of the United States had some massive blind spots that led to the Cole. The captain of my brother's ship had some massive blind spots that led to a ship that he was in charge of being attacked by suicide bombers. And throughout the chain of command in leadership in the Navy, there were some massive blind spots that now, after the Cole, they have reformatted every aspect of basic training for sailors based upon what happened on the Cole. So the unfairness and the tragedy and the injustice that didn't have to happen for us happened for us, but now likely will never happen again, because the leaders have finally learned from their blind spots, from the mistakes that they made.
I had on the podcast General Bernard Banks, who taught leadership at West Point for a long time, and one of the interesting things he said, and I think 2000, 2001 through there has reshaped the military in general, how they look at stuff. They've rethought leadership. How before it's definitely this command and control, lots of layers to get through, and so I hate that something bad like that has to happen, but it really has reshaped a lot of that too.
Yeah. Totally reshaped it. And I will tell you, Cody, I will be really honest. Had not my brother given his life the way he did, you wouldn't know who I am. You would never have this. Rory would never have met me. I probably wouldn't be a keynote speaker like I was. I probably wouldn't be having the impact on companies and organizations like I am. I wouldn't be consulting with Fortune 500 companies and massive organizations to help them to develop the right kind of leadership acumen and to be able to see those blind spots. I would not be doing this had not my brother made that sacrifice. So everything happens for a reason. There's a purpose behind it. And our job is just to learn that purpose and to use it to get better and to improve and help other people to improve.
It's really good, and a similar characteristic I see in people who go on to do a lot of great stuff is there's some sort of tragedy, unfortunately, that tends to fuel a lot of that. Well, let's talk about, I was going to say you have this great football story, but it's actually an awful football story, but I think there's just some leadership lessons there. And I know you went to South Carolina, were kind of promised, the opportunity to compete for tight end, jersey number 87, I know, but didn't. And I know you even kind of mentioned, there was a bad situation, but maybe hit that. And then you said two things when I was listening to some just two lessons that you learned from that. One, I remember you saying, as leaders, always keep your promises. And the other was that mindset is more important than skill set. So maybe just set up that story and what we could all learn from that.
Yeah, for sure. Great one. So as a high school athlete, I played tight end. So that's the only position I ever played. I'd never played defense in my life. And so for those who don't know football, tight end, they block, but they also catch passes. And I was an offensive-minded kind of tight end. I wanted to catch touchdowns. My whole goal was to score 6 every time that I got the ball into my hands. And I did my best to do that. I punished people as a tight end. And I had a fair number of touchdowns, a 79-yarder, 44-yarder, 63-yarder. I was pretty good as a tight end, really good as a tight end. Got recruited by a bunch of schools to play tight end. And the long story short, I kind of fell in line that South Carolina was going to be one of my schools. And so when the coach was recruiting me, I said, Coach, listen, I want to come to South Carolina and play football, but I want to play tight end. And you're recruiting me as an outside linebacker. And he says, Anton, we think you can go pro you can help us the best as an outside linebacker, and we think you can go pro. And I said, but I believe that I'm a tight end. I really believe that I'm a tight end. And he says, well, okay, but you're a defensive lineman, outside linebacker. We're going to play you in that position. I said, well, Coach, I'll commit to South Carolina if you could do 2 things. Number one, give me a chance to play tight end. If I don't prove to you in camp that I'm the best tight end on your roster, then I'll volunteer to go play outside linebacker / defensive end. And he says, okay, deal. And I said, what's the second? He says, what's the second thing? And I said, the second thing is I want my jersey number. 87 is my favorite jersey number. It's the number that I wore. It scored all those touchdowns. It's like the best year of my life, if you will. It's when I fell in love with hip hop and knew that something was bigger for me in this world. Can I have 87? And I said, even if I don't play tight end, I know I can play outside linebacker and wear 87 because in those days you could. He says, you can have both. And I show up on campus, Cody, in August of 1991, big and bad, haughty, 6'5", 225 pounds, thinking I'm a beast mode and, college athlete when I was still scrawny. And I walk into the equipment room and the equipment manager hands me jersey number 59. Now, for those who don't know football, there's no tight end that ever wore the number 59. Offensive linemen wear tight end 59, defensive linemen and linebackers wear 59. That's it. And I was moved to defensive tackle. Defensive end, defensive tackle. They wanted me to be on a 3 technique to block the big centers and guards. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I was shook. I was mentally shook because I was not at all comfortable with that. I was in a position I'd never been in, and how I equated to people who might work in a corporate job somewhere. You get hired to be in the marketing department, but the day you show up to work, they now tell you you're in operations. Or, you're a sales guy and you want to sell, but they tell you, no, you're going to be the director of sales. So your job is to manage other sales agents and not do sales anymore. I was mentally not there. And because I was mentally not there, I didn't perform well. I never figured out the position. I never got good. Matter of fact, I did not touch the field the first 2 years I was in college because my mindset was focused on tight end. My skill set was I was being used as a defensive end, defensive tackle, and I wasn't prepared for it. And your mindset is more important than your skill set. And I didn't have the right mindset to thrive in that 59 environment. I had an 87 mindset, but I was in a 59 environment. The second piece is really the first piece for me is that my coach injured me. He injured me when he made 2 promises that he didn't keep. And he injured me and lacked the integrity to be honest with me to say, Anton, you're not going to get your jersey number. Anton, I don't care what you want. I was told, or I'm making a decision that you're going to play defense and not play offense. And he couldn't be honest with me. And what he did not know is the blind spot of how his decision-making affected me long-term. that he saw me, because again, he was even my position coach when I got to college, that he just saw me as a outside linebacker, defensive end person who just wasn't performing, that I'm just not good enough to play the position, that I'm working hard, but I'm not good enough. But what he didn't see was the emotional injury that I got from having a promise, a simple promise. I mean, a simple promise. And some might say, Anton, why were you so caught up on the jersey number? Well, Deion Sanders will tell you, if you go into any meeting room that he has right now, is that when you look good, you feel good. And when you feel good, you play good. And so I didn't look good in number 59. And I literally spent my entire career at South Carolina changing my number to get as close to 87 as I could. So I went from 59 to 97. And then when I moved from defense back to offense, I changed my number from 97 to 57 because I was trying to get as close to 87 as I could, because I never felt right in the wrong jersey number. So a lot of lessons there that I still unpack every day, every time I get a chance to share.
As you are able to look back on it now with some history, any one big positive that did come out of that you can see, like how it has shaped you for where you're at today?
Oh, yeah. I could give you 100 positives, but the one that I'll give you is probably the most important one, is when I moved to the offensive line. I went from defense, where I was miserable for 2.5 years, to offense. And when I moved to the offensive line, I got a whole nother context around the value of leadership. And that is, every leader should want to be an offensive lineman. And that is, it is not about you getting the credit, but it's about you putting everybody else on the team in the position that they can be successful and they can get the credit. See, without an offensive line, no quarterback thrives, no running back becomes a 1,000-yard rusher, and no receiver has time to catch a pass if the quarterback doesn't have time to get the ball off. The second lesson that I learned is that your job as a leader is to do the work, to do the hard work that other people don't see, and many times they won't ever understand. The third lesson is that as an offensive lineman, you can't operate solo. You have to have a group of people to your left and to your right of you, and you're all on the same page. You have to be one heartbeat. Because that's the way I interpret it, is that as a successful offensive line, when I played center, I had to know what both guards were doing and both tackles. That I had to tell everybody what to do, but then make sure that we slid the protection in the right way, that we knew where the corner was blitzing from, which linebacker was walking up into the A-gap, and if both of them were walking up into the A-gap, that we had to change the protection and be man on man, hat on a hat. And so the lessons that I learned from all of the change that I went through in college is that everything that you go through is preparing you for the moment that you're in. That because I was an offensive lineman, I knew what those defensive tackles and defensive ends wanted and what they were thinking, what they were trying to accomplish. Because for 2 years, I tried to get into the right mindset and learn the plays and learn what the mentality needed to be, but I physically wasn't able to do it. But it all helped me so much more when I got to the O-line. And I had so much fun not being the person catching the touchdowns. I had so much fun not being the person whose name was called out. Like, it was so great, Cody, that the years that I played on the offensive line, I knew I was doing a good job if my name never got called. See, the only time we hear an offensive lineman's name is when they screw up.
Not for good things.
No, when they hold, I had one penalty my entire career as an offensive line, one penalty. And you know what that penalty was? Ineligible man downfield. Because I thought it was a screen, but it wasn't a screen. It was a shallow cross. And when my captain, Toby Cates, caught the pass, I was beside him when he caught the pass. And then he got tackled, and I was like, I ain't supposed to be here. That's one flag that I got my entire career. So
thought you were just trying to sneak out and get that touchdown, back to it. So, well, you mentioned hard work, so let me use that as a transition.
Sure.
So into politics, you were appointed by President Obama to serve under the HHS secretary, Kathleen Sebelius, who is the former governor of our
Yes.
great state of Kansas.
Yes.
And you played a pretty prominent role in navigating the stakeholders during the implementation of the Affordable Care Act.
Yes.
Obviously, there was probably some hard work because there was a fair share of disagreement around that act. How did you approach building relationships with all these different groups, some of whom were probably pretty leary of this act?
Oh, massively. Leary was the nicest word you could probably
I was trying to
utter.
find a nice word.
Yeah, let's just say it was Hatfield and McCoys sometimes. It was, the Dallas Cowboys versus the Pittsburgh Steelers sometimes. And sometimes it was Russia versus Ukraine. I mean, like it was bad. So I think the thing that I learned throughout my experiences as I moved up to playing that role in President Obama's administration is that life moves at the speed of relationships. And the key is finding out what's important to other people. And these lessons that I learned from football and from business and from leadership really boils down to three things, okay? And these are three questions, and I'm going to give you the questions, but I'm going to show you how I applied them to my role as a leader at HHS and even in business. Every person you meet, no matter where they are, no matter what they do, they're asking three questions about you the moment they meet you. Every person. And so if you're a CEO, your executive team are asking these three questions. And if you're a frontline manager or supervisor, that new hire is asking these same three questions. And every leader that I met in the Obama administration, every community constituency person was asking the same three questions. Question number one is, do you care about me? Or do you care about people like me? Question number two is, will you help me? Or by extension, will you help me to be successful? And question number three is, can I trust you? And so from day one, when you meet someone, just believe that they have those three questions tattooed on their chest. They're wearing a shirt or a sweatshirt or a hat that have those three questions. And I knew that coming into the game. And so my job was never to try to sell you anything, was never to try to convince you of anything, is for me to first understand, what do you care about? I want to know, what do you care about? What's important to you? What matters to you? What inspires you? What pisses you off? What makes you tick? What frustrates you? What makes you angry? What do you most want in life? And when I could understand what you care about, it was then my job to make that important to me. And so for all of those diverse stakeholders group, my first job was to understand what they cared about. Like as a small business owner, I cared about my bottom line more than I cared about my employees. And I needed to know that that was you. Now, I would say that's a mistaken, frame of reference, right? To care about your bottom line more than your employees, because they would say that and say, listen, that's why I can't afford to give them health insurance coverage, because it'll eat up my entire margin, okay? But I needed to understand what was important to you. And if you're a big company, what was important to you? What do you care about, right? Then the second question is, will you help me to be successful? So my job was to understand, what did you need help with so you could spend time on the things that you cared about? And if you're a small business owner and you can't keep employees because they quit you to go work for another company providing them health insurance coverage, well, I know that turnover is not good for your business. It ain't helping your bottom line to lose people. So I began to understand these type of things, what people needed help with, and my job was to serve them by helping them with what they need. Not just serve them, but equip them and empower them with the tools and the information so they can get what they want out of the deal, whatever it is, right? And then I knew that if I answered that first question repeatedly and that second question repeatedly, then the third question would take care of itself. But if I never answered the first two, then you're never going to trust me. You're never going to believe in me. And why I was able to move up the ranks at HHS and play a more and more prominent role is because for 19 months, when I got my first appointment as the regional director in Atlanta, I had the 8 states in the Southeast, which arguably were the most hostile 8 states to everything President Obama wanted to do. But I learned to build relationships by caring about the same things that the people in those 8 states cared about, helping them with the things that they needed help with. And then over 19 months, building the kind of trust that they weren't adversarial anymore, that they could at least have an honest conversation around what they believed was right or wrong in the law. And many times they had misinformation. And so you never can get to the place of talking about honesty and truthful information until you deal with the fact that people believe that you don't care about them. In some degree, people believe that, the president and administration didn't care about them, which was the total opposite. And so it happened over time. And the last thing that I'll say, which really made me successful, is that I understood college football. And if you're going to be in the South,
it's a good thing in the South, huh?
So when people ask me, they would ask me, Anton, where's your region? I would say, I have the entire SEC, but Louisiana and Arkansas, and they threw in a basketball state of North Carolina. Oh, I get it. So I built relationships with people by answering those 3 questions.
Yeah, I think, finding commonality there is such a huge part of that. It's funny. One of the things people ask me a lot of times about the culture here and what we've tried to build. And I say, what I would hope every employee would say is not talk about the fun things that we do in that, but that ultimately that they feel like we care about them as a person first and foremost. I want that to be foundational to everything we do. So I think those are 3 great questions any leader should be, thinking about anytime they're interacting. So let me ask this. You obviously spent a fair amount of time around President Obama, but have also spent some time around both the Bushes and Clinton as well. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people think they're vastly different people, and I'm not sure if that's really the case. Are there things that you observed about them that was very similar in their approach to leadership?
Yes. So the first thing is kind of the thing that I started with about service. So I'll just demystify this for anyone. Being president of the United States is the hardest job on planet Earth. In most days, it is more pain than pleasure. It's more torture than it is terrific. And so for anyone who decides that that's what they want to ultimately do, has to have some framework around service in their life. Or let me be clear, to be good at the job, you have to have that framework around service. And I didn't agree with, everything Bill Clinton did. I didn't agree with everything what Barack Obama did. I didn't agree with everything that George W. Bush did and H.W. did. But I'm real clear that they understand that they had a role and a responsibility to do something that was much bigger than them. And they were just a tool of service to build on the legacy of this great nation. They were a tool. And so that was one similarity. The other thing that I would say I learned about them is that they surround themselves with people who are smarter than them. Mm-hmm. That they know that they don't have all the answers, that they know enough that they need other people who know more. And I think it's a great trait for people to own, is that, a president is only as good as his or her advisors. I mean, that's really it.
Yep.
And I was grateful to have the opportunity to pour into Barack Obama on a few occasions and give him things that helped him at different times. And I just know how precious that is. But to see a leader who's willing to listen and learn and take in what you say and then apply it is a great attribute. And so from those, 5 presidents in particular, I can tell you those 4 presidents in particular, they were pretty phenomenal at doing that.
I had the opportunity actually once to interview President Bush, and W, that is. And I remember him saying that specifically. He's like, there's so many things, that you're responsible for in that role, that it is physically impossible to know them all. So the most important thing you do is you have to hire good people and mm-hmm. trust them. And he's like, sometimes another thing I remember, and I think it's just a great leadership lesson. I'm not sure we see it as much as we used to. He said, and there's a lot of times that my advisor steered me in the wrong direction, right?
Yes.
That I had to trust what they were saying.
Yes.
And he's like, but one thing I remember, and this is where what I don't see as much anymore from a leadership, he said, but even when it was their fault, I took responsibility, right? I never blamed them. I always took the responsibility for it. And I'm not going to name names. We just don't see that as much as we used to. But it was just something that stuck with me. It's like, man, when you have good people, you've got to take their advice, but then you've also got to, make sure that they know you're going to have their back, even if it wasn't the right advice.
So you're totally right. We don't see that a lot at all anymore. And I talked about it in my book, The Presidential Principles. I wrote that book about my experiences with presidents and the impact that they had on me and how you can use those same principles to have an impact as a leader. But one of those principles is to own the accountability and share the responsibility. And what do I mean by that? It's a turn of phrase, which is, it's kind of like a quarterback. It's like a great quarterback. Like, when the quarterback wins a Super Bowl, everybody wants to say the quarterback won the game for us. But the best know that they wouldn't have been able to win the game without the other 10 people around them. So they share the responsibility of the success. But if the quarterback loses a Super Bowl, they own the accountability for the loss. That is my fault that we didn't get it done. And the same in the concept of being a president, that if you have a team around you and they steer you in the wrong direction or give you bad advice and something gets massively screwed up, do not throw them under the bus and say, well, they gave me bad advice, or they're just a bad person, or I shouldn't have hired that dummy in the first place. It's my fault that this went wrong, and I'm going to be the one to fix it. I'm going to be the one that makes it right because it falls under my leadership. And so that's a principle that I think the greatest leaders have, is that they own it when it goes wrong, and when it goes well, they give everybody the credit and give everybody some opportunity to say that they were responsible for making the success happen. And we need to get back to that in every aspect of life and business. I mean, we've seen a fair number of examples, even in corporate America, of things going wrong with corporations and the CEO not owning up to it, AKA what happened this past holiday season with Southwest Airlines and 3,000 flights. And so we see the examples all over the place that we need to get back to owning the accountability when things go wrong and sharing the responsibility when things go right.
Yeah, that's great advice. You were talking about that book. You also wrote another book called Just Lead, and you talk in there about the idea that a lot of companies are drowning in this flood of workplace dissatisfaction, and that I think that was somewhat there during pre-COVID, and now I think has been amplified post-COVID. What are some steps that business leaders can take to change that level of workplace dissatisfaction?
Yes. So there's so many things that have happened over the last 2 years that we as adults and as humans and as family members and community members have had some emotional shifts, continental shifts in our mindset. That's number one. And then others of us have taken the blinders off about our workplaces and about what happens at work and what's important at work. And so I will say to any CEO, as I said earlier, you had some massive blind spots about what's happening in your organization to your people. And you have to gain some awareness around those blind spots, and you got to fix those. And if you want to keep your people, if you want to continue to be productive, you want to grow, you got to fix them. And so here's the first thing I'll tell you to do. Go back to those 3 questions that I gave you. Do you care about me? Will you help me? And can I trust you? And I want you to examine from your day-to-day actions as an executive, how are you showing the people around you every day that you care about them, that you're helping them to be successful, and that you can be trusted? Examine your actions, not your words. Your mission statement has the words, Your value statements on the wall, oh, they have the words. Okay. Your, employee engagement plan for last year, they might have the words in the plan. But examine your daily actions as a leader. How are you showing people that you care about them, and that you're helping them to be successful, and that they can trust you? That's the first thing. Second thing that I will say to you, and this is going to sound very glib when I say it, but it's going to shock you. The best thing you can do to retain your top talent people and keep them the most productive is to throw a party every 3 months for your team. Throw a party every 3 months. And I'm not talking order Pizza Hut and bring it into the office conference room, throw a party. I'm saying get off site one day and have a good time with your people. Why am I telling you to do this? Because you want to probably give people raises and make sure you got equitable pay. Yes, you should probably do those things too, but that's not the biggest return on investment. See, research shows, there's some MIT research shows that the ROI on keeping your best people is 150% greater if you have more company outings and allow people to gather and have fun events like going to Topgolf or literally throwing a party or something that is fun activity where people get to know each other. Now, why is that important? Because it goes back to that first question. Do you care about me? Well, it's pretty hard to care about people that you don't really know. And with virtual work and all of these things in the quarterly pressure of building a business and trying to, we always want people to do things, but we don't really get to know them. We don't know their spouses' names, their kids' names, their favorite football team, or that they can't stand barbecue. But every time we have a company potluck, we're ordering barbecue, And so you got to get to know people, and you got to create environments where people get to know each other. And then when you learn about the people on your team and what's important to them, show them that you care about the things that are important to them, that they share with you and that you know. Those are two big things. Throw a quarterly party, answer those 3 questions. And if I had to give you one more, and this was a unique new one, post-2020 as well, not related to COVID, but related to George Floyd, is have a high priority around diversity, equity, and inclusion in your organization. Because I can tell you that the organizations who do have the highest priority around diversity are outperforming their peers inside their industry between 15 and 33% greater, particularly when they have that diversity at a senior leadership level, at the C-suite or on the board. So don't get caught up in thinking diversity is a buzzword, because I'm not talking about just racial diversity, but I'm talking about diversity of thought, diversity of perspective, diversity of experience, people who have different backgrounds. I mean, I'll tell an executive the story of what turned things around for us inside of the healthcare reform, the Affordable Care Act, is that we knew that our goal was to make it sustainable. And we needed young people to make it sustainable. But we were having this senior level meeting, and here I am at 40 years old in this meeting. I'm old. I'm an old guy in this meeting. And I'm the youngest by 10 years in the meeting, bro. Everybody else had white and gray hair, right?
Yep.
I told them the best thing we can do is for you all not to come back to the next meeting and send your special assistant that's between the ages of 26 and 30 to the meeting. When we got young people in the room around the table, we learned what was important to young people in the conversation about health insurance coverage. And when we learned what was important to them is when we started changing our strategy to reach young people right where they are. The reason why I gave Barack Obama the words, you can get health insurance coverage as cheap as your cell phone bill. Because if you were under 30, you know how much your cell phone bill costs every month, right? And mean you telling me I can get health insurance coverage for the same as I pay for my cell phone bill? It clicked. And when it clicked, we started getting young people to sign up for coverage. And that's what actually made the law sustainable, because those 29-year-olds who who are the highest population of uninsured people in America, a lot of them entrepreneurs trying to start their own businesses, et cetera, think they're going to live forever and didn't have coverage, but know that they needed it. And that's what turned things around. So for as a business, don't forget to focus on the dimensions of diversity to help you to see your blind spots, because those young people helped us to see blind spots that those older folks and gray hair folks in the room could not see. So yeah. Those are really
good. A couple things there, two things. One is a statement, then one I'll transition to this final kind of question I have for you. It's funny, we're getting ready here in probably 3 or 4 weeks from when we're recording this. We take our team, if we hit our stretch goal, we take our entire team and their spouse or a guest to Mexico for like a all-inclusive trip. And we started that when we had about 30 employees, and now we have about 830, so it's a big deal. It's still one of the most talked about things that we do. It's the highest voted, perk or benefit or whatever you want to call it every single year on our survey. And it is, I only share this because I think you shared something there that what I've just seen, I'll say over the last few years, is like people are longing for connection. We've just not had it. And I think work is one of those last places that a lot of people do have the opportunity for that. So really leveraging that right now, I think, is a very powerful thing. So that was one thing. Now, the second's more of a little bit of a transition. You were talking about diversity. And the final question I want to ask you before I ask you these kind of lightning round questions is, one of the things that I think our industry, financial services in general, struggles with is the number of minorities and female advisors in our industry. And it feels like we've been talking about it for the 20 plus years now I've been in this industry. I think, in fact, only 2% of certified financial planners are black. Are there some strategies or tactics that you think our industry or even our advisors could adopt to improve or increase that number?
Yes. So that's a great question. That I'm definitely going to give you a couple nuggets. And first, let me tell you that 3 of my best friends in the whole world are financial advisors. And we play college football. 2 of us played college football together. The third one, they met at a small brokerage firm when they got started. And we all are thick as thieves today. And we kind of hang out together, go to games together, have vacation together. And so I hear a lot of the industry stories from them. I would say the first thing that you could do is to really be intentional of fishing in the right place. And what do I mean fishing in the right place? If I want to catch bass, then I can go to Lake Okeechobee in Florida and I can catch some bass. But if I want to catch some tuna, I'm not catching tuna in Lake Okeechobee. I got to go fish where the tuna are. And I would say what every financial advisory firm, if you're looking to recruit diverse talent, I would say look at the top 25 universities that have business schools that have the highest percentage of diverse students in those business schools, undergrad and MBA programs. Okay. And don't go recruit there. I'm not telling you to go recruit. I'm telling you go have a conversation with the dean of the business school, because that dean has obviously figured something out to attract that large number of diverse talent into their business schools as an undergraduate students or MBA students. And so you want to have a conversation on what they're doing to attract that level of diversity. And then figure out how can you establish a partnership with that business schools to expose people as early as possible to what would be possible in your industry. That's some simple things to do. I have a lot more strategies in the book, Just Lead, that I think would be incredibly helpful for people. And so small, soft pitch there, but this is where I help organizations build strategy is around. I helped an academic health system that I used to work at make it on Forbes list of the top 500 employers in America for diversity, because he took a strategic approach. You can't just throw darts at a dartboard and think you're going to figure it out. And you can't think you're going to sprinkle pixie dust on it and solve the problem tomorrow. That this might be a 5 to 7 year strategy, but it requires strategic leadership thinking around what do we want diversity for? Is it just for diversity's sake? Because if you do, it's going to flame out in 24 months. But if you're thinking about it as a strategic business advantage and thinking about how do I tap into markets that haven't tapped in? Because the guys that I know, the friends that I got who I'm happy to introduce you to, because most of them are now out of that business right now. But the thing that they have is a customer base that looks completely like me. And they've been able to get to the top of their field. One of them got recruited by a headhunter and became a trader because he was able to build a book of business that was massive, that got him to a large financial institution, then got him to another place. So you got to have conversations with people who are at the pinnacles of success in your industry already, but fit some dimension of diversity. So whether it's women, people of color, people of Hispanic descent, even people who might be from another country. These are all things that you can do, and I'm happy to help anybody in any way do that.
Yep, appreciate that. Okay, I know I've had you on here for a while. If you can, I got 5 quick lightning round questions I ask everyone at the end. Can be short answers, kind of whatever. So we talked about a little bit of COVID. I'd like to ask everyone, what lesson did you learn over the past 2 years that you think you'll carry forward for the rest of your career or life?
Walk 5 miles a day and intermittent fast.
Excellent. Great advice. Okay, second question. What was the one thing that you did to graduate from being a good leader to a great leader?
Become a lifelong learner.
So that's a great transition to my third question. Is there something that you're doing this year in 2023 to drive your own personal growth that you're excited about?
Giving up control of large aspects of my business.
Nice. Have you done that before, or is that delegation going to be a new thing?
Totally new thing. It's a scary thing, but I recognize that in order for me to get to my next level, I have to get out of my own way and allow other people to operate in their zone of genius so I can stay in my zone of genius. And that is giving up control of certain aspects of things that I'm doing in my business.
It's such a hard thing for any, business leader, entrepreneur to do. I see so many of our advisors as they grow and scale, they're so used to being the day-to-day, the person that's meeting with clients, to get out of that. Yeah. And just to encourage you in that, once you do it well, it's so freeing, and allows you to grow and scale. So and more freedom, more time, all those good things. So, okay, fourth question. Is there a book, can't be one of your own, that you have recommended the most to other leaders?
Oh, two books. Rethinking Success by J. Douglas Holliday and 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson.
Two great. Actually, first one I haven't. The Jordan Peterson one's a great one. Okay, final question. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
The best piece of advice I've ever received is write it down because it lasts longer. In the context of that is, as a speaker, we love to tear it up from the stage. I mean, I get standing ovations 50 times a year from the stage. But the advice is that people are going to leave your speech and not remember but maybe one thing that you said. And so if you write it down in a book, in a journal, or in a course, or in a workbook, it'll last much longer.
Great advice. Anton, great to finally connect. Thanks for taking the time to be with us today. What's the best way for people to stay connected to you or follow you online?
Yes, you can go to the home, antongunn.com is a homepage where you can find everything. You can find out about what I'm doing, where I'm going next, and how I can help you as a leader. But I'd love for everybody to connect with me on LinkedIn at Anton J. Gunn. That's where you can find me on LinkedIn.
All right. So thank you for all the incredible insights. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you're sharing it with someone who wants to be a better leader. We need better leaders right now. So go be great out there. Anton, again, thank you.
Thank you very much.